finally leaks about why Dan Ashworth resigned at Manchester United. It was a shock. He was 5 months into the job, spent £200 million, and there was a bust up between him and Ratcliffe over managerial candidates at Manchester United. Fresh reports are saying Ashworth quit after Ratcliffe rebuffed his coaching picks. Ratcliffe thought they were too safe, and they forced through Ruben Amorim, ignoring what the director of football wanted, so he resigned. This is crazy news coming out. A lot of people are saying, good for Ratcliffe for killing Dan Ashworth. I would push back and say, you hire a director of football, he gets to pick the coach. That's the whole thing. But the manager, Ratcliffe, kind of fooling around, getting in the weeds again.
How has the high-flying coach paid off thus far? It's like, we're the lowest finish we've had, in 50 years since we've been relegated in the 70s. This was the first red flag that came out in the INeos, true red flags. There were some red flags, obviously, around the messaging and how they handled both the retention and eventual firing of Erik ten Hag, but the true, flare in the sky, oh, this is fucking off, was when they fired Ashworth after courting him for, almost a year, brought him in big money, one of the best names in the game, CV to boot, unbelievable in terms of recruitment. He looked at the squad and said, hey, this is not the time for a high-flying manager from the Iberian Peninsula. We need someone boring. We need some Gareth Southgate. Keep it simple, 4-2-3-1, and let's just stay up. And the fact that, Sir Jim didn't like that because it wasn't sexy enough, you and I were right. I mean, we called this. We're like, it was probably because he wanted the one route. They wanted to go the shiny toy route, and that's not how you build a football club. So Dan Ashworth landed on his feet. I'm actually just happy he didn't end up at another Premier League club. That in fact he went to the FA is good. It's kind of a neutral. But this is bad because Sir Jim has far too much influence and he doesn't know what he's doing. And the whole point is to hire smart people and let them do their job. And instead, he's micromanaging everybody because what's wrong with boring? Sometimes boring gets you back to the top.
Yeah, so let's just get through, just a corporate structure and how it should function, right? So Jim Ratcliffe comes in, he's an owner, he's on the board of directors, he has votes with the Glazers on controlling the club, right? Then you have the CEO, Omar Barada, and then the director of football, Dan Ashworth. The way this should work is Jim Ratcliffe isn't in the day-to-day. Jim Ratcliffe isn't appointing the manager, right? He hires the director of football to suggest who to appoint as manager, and the key reason being there and the why. Because the director of football is assessing the entire squad and saying, hey, we have built this squad over the last 5 to 7 years. We look at the contracts, the values, the lengths, the values of the players in the transfer market, who we can move on, who we can't move on, and realistically, what does that mean? Because you can't fire all the players. Like Amorim, great coach, comes in, plays a different system. We don't have those players. He just has to keep playing that system. He would like to fire all the players. Well, you can't because of contracts. That's why you had Dan Ashworth, this guy, who's going to manage them. And his assessment of the situation was Eddie Howe, Marco Silva, Thomas Frank, Gareth Southgate, Graham Potter. And the fact that Ratcliffe thought that was boring and torpedoed those choices based on his analysis of the squad is incredible because Jim Ratcliffe should hire this guy. If I was in Jim Ratcliffe's position, I would give Dan Ashworth 3 years to do whatever he wanted with this team. I give him a budget. I'd let him make every single decision because he's done it before. He has the CV to do it. And I give him the autonomy to fix Manchester United. And the fact that decision number 1, he literally just disagreed and then forced through a different manager and made arguably the best director of football in Europe resign is insane. That's just not how you run any organization. It means that there's micromanagement. Ratcliffe's in the weeds on everything. He's the reason why it's going all wrong. And the fact that he thinks he knows better about who to appoint at manager at Manchester United than Dan Ashworth is incredible.
No, it's actually, what it does is it draws a parallel between the previous regime that was running the club and what they did. They made a decision not too dissimilar to this. They brought in Ralph Rangnick. He was telling them things that they didn't want to hear, unpopular things, but things that would be, a different route that they wanted to choose, and then they just booted his ass out the door. Instead of he came in and told them something that was diametrically opposed to what do they want to hear, and they kill the messenger as well as the message. So this speaks to someone who is not used to probably, I think he's got a lot of people around him, Sir Jim, that tell him that his ideas are great. And I don't think he's got a lot of pushback. I don't think at this age, with his level of wealth, he is used to people forcefully being I don't think that's a great idea, dude. Because this is not a great idea. You don't have the drawn out saga to get one of the best names in the game diagnose a situation that is a mess. We're still a mess. We were a mess 6 months ago when they fired Ten Hag in the first place, and then not listen to him. For a guy who is qualified to do this, been doing it for his whole career, and you've been running petrochemical companies very well, but that's not your area of expertise. And the fact that he keeps getting involved is like, that's how everything gets fucked up, dude, because you're not a steady hand. You're someone who's acting emotionally, and he's done it time and time again this season. And that doesn't give me a lot of confidence of the future under Sir Jim, because this is the biggest red flag of everything they've done. Forget sacking Fergie, forget keeping Ten Hag, firing Ten Hag, recruiting the $200 million. This is like, what are you doing, dude? Because he's the long con. He's like the play that's going to get you back over time, slowly.
Well, we don't have a director of football.
I know.
We're like
rudderless.
Like there's Wilcox, but he's not the director of football. Right now he's probably acting as such. So we're back to the Glazer way of things. We're back to, Woodward and Arnold and people who don't know what they're doing, making rash decisions. Hey, you built a squad that's going to play 4 at the back and you have £1 billion in. No, let's get 3-4-3 in. That's the reason we're 16th in the league. Now, can we win Europa League and then turn it all around? Like probably not.
Probably not.
You probably need another 700 to $1 billion to rebuild the team in Amorim's image. Now, are they going to give Amorim the time and the money to do that? No. Well, then why would you hire him? Now, these are all the questions that get back to Dan Ashworth's appointment, which ultimately is what I wanted, was to give Ashworth time to rebuild the team with an Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe came into Newcastle. It's a disaster. Fixed the culture, signed some good players, built it up over time. It's a 3 to 5 year program. Like, you need somebody. That profile of coach is exactly someone who knows England, knows the opponents. Like, that's really where the IP is for someone to come in to stop the bleeding at Manchester United. Amorim did not stop the bleeding. He opened the wound even bigger because he's exposing how inflexible the talent is. And ultimately, that is why this is a very crazy decision. And you just don't want to be Jim Ratcliffe being like, I know better. Like Omar Barada saying him and Omar Barada went with Amorim being like, I know better than Dan Ashworth. I think Dan Ashworth will probably get the last laugh here. It's not looking good for Manchester United at the moment. And if we had the money, if we had the deep pockets, if we had £1 billion, I'd more likely side with Ratcliffe and Barada. But since we didn't have the money, I think you need a guy to stabilize, and then you need the Amorim eventually. But we don't. You can't kind of skip the stabilization phase. We went right to the hot thing, and we always needed a more brilliant, kind of like knows England, maybe boring manager who could just kind of like stabilize the ship, let us get players out, let us get better talent in, get the culture going right, and then move on.
Yeah, and sometimes boring's best. You don't always have to go for high flash. We've done that too many times, right? Even some of our signings, right? Like the
chop
change, manager to manager. He has earned the right to make decisions in an autonomous way because he has the CV he does. And Sir Jim, you don't. So that's why you hire this guy, give him time, and let him run. And there's a way of doing it where you didn't have to go like, if you did Thomas Frank or Marco Silva, it's like you still get a little bit of that kind of like sex appeal, like exciting coach, but they also know the league. They know, and that's important. And they understand that pragmatism keeps you alive. And like I think the thing that you see from both managers headed into the Europa League final is like, I think they're too much. They have this like idea in their head that they stick with over pragmatism. And that's why like they're so fucking stubborn. Yes. And it's going to be a battle of the stubbornness, but like you have to be flexible. And who was elite at this? Who was the best that evolved over time as the league evolved and as the squad evolved? Was Sir Alex Ferguson. He was so good at that that people thought he didn't have a playing style. His playing style was to win. So it's a mess. I don't know if Ratcliffe ever learns. I don't think he's going to learn until he gets booted out or loses control or has to sell to the Saudis or the Qataris or whatever. But like this just speaks to the fact that he doesn't have the steadfastness to just let people run and make the right calls because he wants to be involved in everything. He's nervous. He's nervous with that $1.25 billion story. He doesn't want to lose it. He's already lost a quarter of his wealth.
You're too close, man. Look, who blew it? Ashworth for playing it safe or Ratcliffe for swinging the axe? Tell us who's really to blame. Who do you side with in the comments below? Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next Manchester United video.